Welcome to Divorce Cafe, the podcast where we demystify, detangle and hopefully detox the legal processes that follow a separation and help people getting into and out of relationships. We talk to experts in the relationship property world, and today we have expert Stuart Henderson from Henderson Reeves with us. But on the home team, I'm Tina Henderson.
And I'm Shelley for now.
Today's episode revolves around those burning questions that keep people up at night, and we thought we might start with the most crucial one that seems to be for people separating is the home. Having somewhere to live, and that continuity is really central to our security, that of our children, and we're hugely invested, usually emotionally and financially, in the family home. But there is usually only one, and that's a problem when you become two households. First, I thought it would be useful to bring everyone up to speed. We're going to look at what is a family home. How does the law define that?
The law has always got some helpful stuff, and we could read you a definition, but essentially it's the residence that a couple's using, and it's the residence they're using when they separate it. So the dwelling house that you live in at the end of the relationship is the residence, is the family home.
Yeah, and it probably is. Sometimes it is relevant to look at the detail of it, and that the section in the Act says it's the dwelling house the spouses or partners habitually or from time to time use as the only or principal family residence.
And so it doesn't have to be owned jointly, it can be owned in
one
of the partners' names.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to cover other entities as well, but it doesn't matter if it's in the name of one person only. If they're living in it together in their relationship at the time they separate or die,
it matters.
It's the family home.
It matters if it's not owned by one of the parties.
Yeah.
Although it still comes under the definition of family home.
Yep.
But it's not going to be divided under the Act.
It could be a home that you're renting. It could be a home that belongs to one family. It could be that there's no renting agreement in it, but the law might decide, well, yes, actually, you're paying the mortgage, you're
like a trust
keeping
home.
it up to scratch. You do have a tenancy, which is important because if you get to the stage where the owner of the home, maybe one party or one party's parents, says, well, we want her out, then the court has power with regard to the tenancy which will be assumed, and the court can say, well, no, to the owner, the landlord, the parents, you have an obligation to these two, and we're going to vest that obligation in one person, which of course it gives them the right of occupation.
Yeah. So,
okay,
we've got a few questions.
Yes, we have some questions. What we find interesting, hopefully everyone else will as well. So when parties decide to separate, who gets to stay in the house, the family home?
The way it happens means that there's frequently no decision made. Someone gets furious and storms out. Maybe when they want to go back in, they find the doors have been locked and their clothes have been packed up and put on the front door. And so who gets to stay in it can be decided by no decision-making process except by someone's actions. But if you're going to stay in it for as long as you can, it becomes a real question. Do I move out? This relationship's intolerable. We're starting to bicker. Our kids are being affected by it. Should I move out? And should probably relates to the parent who's not the parent the kids naturally rely on for their day-to-day needs. But sometimes that isn't clear. And you can end up with a judge having to decide the two of you staying in the house and
if the
carrying on bickering, right? Then a judge might decide. Yeah. In the generality, the children are likely to stay in the house, and therefore the logical thing. These things don't happen by logic, always, sometimes, but the person who's most important for the children is likely to be the one who should be staying there, and if a judge gets to look at it at some stage, that's the rule that they're going to be applying.
Yeah, and like we've talked about in previous podcasts, the section that gets looked at when there isn't agreement about which adult gets to stay in the house is that section 27, 28 and 28A, and they deal with occupation orders. So if you can't agree between you, despite your best efforts, you can go to court and you ask a judge by making an application for an occupation order. And the thing about the kids comes in, doesn't it, when in 28A, which says that a judge, in making a decision about who gets to live in the house, stay in the house, must have particular regard to the interests of and the needs of any minor children of the relationship. So,
yep, it's there in the law. It might seem to be the human and proper thing to do, but sometimes people can't quite see it that way. But certainly a judge must have regard to the needs of the children.
Particular regard, that was something Mark Hennigan kept repeating, didn't he?
And it's a real dilemma, because if the mother recognises that the kids are being affected by it, he, dog in the manger, stays in the house because someone's told him that he ought to stay in the house, and she leaves, she's really disadvantaged. He can close things down on her, and if she takes the kids away, she's got to set things up for them.
But if
he, and I'm doing the gender thing, but that's the way it usually strikes.
We'll swap it around the next time.
Yeah, so it's if someone were to ask me, this is awful, kids are being affected, should I move out? I'm likely to say, well, if at all possible, stay there and let's get him to move out.
What you're saying is that it is important to know that if you do, pack up and leave, that needs to be a really well thought out decision, because it's harder to get back in, and you might later regret that if the kids are with you.
What a dilemma. You either uplift the kids if the other side won't move out, uplift the kids and all of that trauma, or you leave without the kids and all of that trauma, because the harm that's being done to them from the adult arguments needs to be ended. And
and it is getting more complicated, because I think what you're talking about is a really, I guess, a more traditional setup where the wife maybe looks after the kids most of the time and he works. And I think in that case, it is logical for him to leave, because she is there with the kids most of the time. And that's probably what a judge would say at some point. But what we're seeing more and more is it's not that simple anymore, that you will have 50-50 care or something close to it. Someone does the mornings, someone does the afternoons, and they are actually reliant on both parents to do it. And so that's, I think, the scenario where it gets really difficult to decide.
And there are other arrangements. Some people can make it work doing the nesting thing, where the kids stay in the house and the parents move in and out. There has to be another place to live for each of them. And God, it must be hard.
I reckon.
It must be hard to do. What's your impression?
Move back into your ex's bedroom virtually.
Same bed.
Sharing the bedroom. And it takes an awful lot of nobility of spirit on behalf of the parents to set that up and deal with all the, because neither of them really has another home to live in. And they put their lives on hold, and they have to get on with the other party much more than would be the ordinary case. It's a very hard thing to do, but what a wonderful thing to do for kids.
Probably only short term, I'd imagine. I don't think you could do that for 5 years.
And I guess it's the same thing, that before you agree to do that, maybe talk to your lawyer about how it might go.
And if you're at loggerheads, FDR,
Family Dispute Resolution,
provides you with a mediator whose job is to try and resolve issues around children mainly, but that's a big issue around children, and it shouldn't be confined just to children. It should spill over into what children need. And so going to someone who's a professional, trained to try and work with the two of you and move you towards a solution, it's there, it's available. Get on the phone, ring Fairway.
And as Mark Hennigan again was saying in his episode, it's good for the kids when parents can communicate and work together to resolve something and reduce that conflict. So
kids learn a marvellous lesson. Even when you don't love each other, you still dedicate yourselves and set aside your own lives for their benefit. Because if you don't, kids think, oh, they don't think I'm worthwhile, I must be miserable. creature, awful problems arise.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so next question. Can my ex-partner get an order to sell the house?
We didn't do question 2.
Oh. You were meant to do questions.
Yeah, I know.
Do you wanna do that?
Ladies.
Is FDR available for people who aren't in a relationship?
It's a family dispute resolution.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So our relationship is frighteningly close to a de facto one, I would say. Who has to pay the mortgage? So once you've worked out and somebody's in the home, who has to pay the mortgage?
It's probably a mortgage that you're both liable for. So legally, you're both liable
to the bank.
And if you both refuse to pay it, the bank will take steps to sell you up. And it's something that really has to be negotiated. But if nothing's negotiated, the courts approach it on the basis that whoever stays in the home has responsibility for the outgoings.
It's not quite as clear cut, is it?
Nope.
No, because what the court is balancing up the disadvantage to the person who's moving out. They've got accommodation costs. They're also leaving their capital in. So there's that interest component. You're entitled to interest on your capital. But practically speaking, the way that they often do it, right, is it seems fair.
And it's a rule of thumb. People, I mean, we're looking at urgent questions or important questions, and people do need to know the answers. And if I ignore the little detailed ifs and buts, the general answer is absolutely the person who stays in the home pays the outgoings.
And if you can't afford it, so say you have been the primary caregiver and you can't afford to cover all of those, that's where things like spousal maintenance can chip in. So yes, you can take responsibility for those. It doesn't mean that your ex doesn't have to chip in towards that cost.
He's legally liable, so
he or she,
the
other owner,
the one who goes is legally liable, and it's their responsibility to make sure that the one who is there, got to keep an eye on it to make sure that the mortgage payments are being made, and because the mail will go to that house, and if you're elsewhere, and I'm not being gender inappropriate, the MAIL will go to that house. You may not find that there's default notices and things flying around.
Anymore.
Don't they?
No.
Okay.
But yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
I take the point.
So, but that person does have a responsibility. That person who's out of the home has a responsibility to make sure that the children are able to be housed in that home, which if the bank comes along brings it to a pretty horrible end. So I didn't want to leave it with the person who's in the house has responsibility. They do. Other person has responsibility too.
Yeah, and may have that
and
spousal
sometimes putting the mortgage on an interest only or some kind of short-term arrangement.
There's things you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
And if banks are obliged to consider what they can do if there's been a sudden event in your life. All banks are required to do that, but so you go to them and ask, what can you do for me?
Yep. Talk to your bank.
Cool. Question 3.
Oh, okay. This is my turn and my one. Can my ex get an order to sell the house against my wishes? And so this must be assuming the house is in whose name? Both names? His name?
It's the family home.
Both names. So they both own it. And so can my ex-partner, whether that is a woman or a man,
because it's a common
make me sell the house.
It's a common thread, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, if you don't, I'm gonna sell the house.
Yeah.
Worse, if it's in one person's name, can they sell it without having to fight the battle over should it be sold?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is if it's the family home, whosever name's on the title of the two of them, it's actually owned by each of them in equal shares.
But
and once the relationship's been going for 3 years.
You have to go to court and get to stop
but that is the law. So it gives you the right, for example, to put a caveat notice of claim on it, even though your name's not on it.
That's a preemptive thing, right?
So I just disrupted your answer.
Question? You disrupted
Can you get an order to sell?
Yeah, can you get an order? So if it's, let's say it's in both names. Like you're saying, if it's in one name, you can also get an order and you do have the right to do that. But can my ex-partner in both of our names say,
I guess it's
time to sell the house?
Ultimately, yes. You can ask the court for an order for sale. The court won't make it'll take the court quite a time to get through the process of hearing from both sides. And the court,
which is how long what are we saying? 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Well, the court is required to consider all of the circumstances that are relevant to the application. So that's changed from what the law used to say.
Yeah.
So presumably it's a full hearing.
And in desperate circumstances, a court can be persuaded to move really quickly. Like if it's on the brink of a mortgagee sale and that's going to be ruinous, and someone's being a dog in the manger and not getting out.
Yeah.
And the court will intervene in those circumstances and make an order. But the court has to have regard to the needs of the children generally. And so if you're the vulnerable one with the children, you need to respond to any court application that comes your way, because the answer to your question was the court will give each party time to make their statements to the court, in sworn affidavits usually, as to should it be sold. Yes, it's desperate.
Yeah.
Should it be sold? No, I need it for the kids and there's no alternative, and he's got this, that and the other place.
Yeah.
The other party has got this, that and the other place.
And the Act has got a specific provision that says the court can delay a division of assets.
Yep.
Where that's in, I think it is where it's in the best interest of the children.
In the interests of the children. And the fact that they can delay it means also that they can hasten it. And so the answer to your question is, yes, the court can.
But also, yes, you can stop them from doing so, because you've described one scenario with the dog in the manger, but the other scenario is the non-working partner looking after the kids, no income, and the working partner that doesn't live there says, I'm not paying the mortgage and I'm going to make you sell. There is avenues for that person, and that might be spousal maintenance as well as an order to delay selling the house.
So the court can order it to be sold, but the other party has a right to be heard and argue and convince the court that it shouldn't be.
There'd have to be something pretty important outweighing. Like, it's not enough to say, I want my capital out now. We've talked about some of those cases. It has to be something more than that if you're going to displace the kids.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, the court, the job of the judge is to consider everything and try and work out what's fair, right? And
you've got a right to be heard.
Taking into account the children.
Yeah. So what if our family home is owned by a company or a trust? Does that bring any special provisions into play?
It means that it's not owned by the two of you, and the court has power only if it can decide that legally the right of each of the parties to be there is in the nature of a tenancy. It might not have been a signed tenancy, but if the court were to decide, yes, there is a residential tenancy here, breaks a lot of the rules that are required for residential tenancies, but that's what it is, and I'm going to vest it in the partner who's got the children, say, and all they're doing is vesting the tenancy, so that the tenancy's got to come to an end at some stage. I think the answer I would like to stay with people is that the court's there to do justice in the situation, and the court's a process where you're expected to front and have either your lawyer or yourself present your case, and judges are there to make sensible decisions.
And they've got those general sections like Section 33, power to make, and Section 25, the power to vest assets in people. So they do have powers to do justice in the circumstances.
Finding the money to do it.
Well, yeah.
Are these quicker? Do you think these family home kind of proceedings are quicker than?
You can get things going really quickly. I had a situation once where he was wanting to force her to move out. She was in the home with the kids, and he was wanting to force her to move out, so he stopped paying. The mortgage came up for renewal, and they had to refinance it, and he refused to refinance. And the time approached, he still wouldn't do it. And in a short space of time, I think it took me 7 days to get a court to hold a hearing, and the judge to say, I will vest the property in my client for the purposes of refinancing it and holding it until there's a division of property between you. So courts can move quickly.
So was that so then the title was updated and she actually
I
owns
got
the house herself and she signs all the loan documents?
Yep. The vesting order can be registered. My client was then able to sign the she had all the documents lined up, but it needed two of them, and once it was vested in her, it only needed her, and bingo.
That's a boss move. I love that.
Cool. Your question?
Is it? Okay. How does one party get the right to buy out the other one? Can you get the right to buy out the other one?
I thought that might be one you as the commercial lawyer as well might have some thoughts about, but the short answer is
judge will look at the situation and decide whether actually the thing's got to be sold. There's only one person who's got the capital to buy it out, and the other person can't hold this up any longer. It's been 2 years or whatever, and the court will move it along if it has to be moved along. If it gets problematic if there's two people both saying, I can buy it, I can buy it. And one of the answers to that is to say, all right, we'll put it on the open market by auction, you can each bid in.
And back from that, so that's the court option. That's if you're deadlocked, you can't agree. But the first way that you can be able to buy the other party out is to agree. Sit down, negotiate it. Maybe it comes down to what's the price. You save a commission when you buy the other person out, although the person who gets it still has to pay one in the end.
Or even taking it a few steps back from that, put it in your contracting out agreement. Who's going to have the right to buy you out on separation? So if you do it at the beginning, you can set up a mechanism in that agreement, can't you?
That is one advantage of a contracting out agreement. You're right, because you have to, if you both own the property, you have to agree if one person's to buy the other out. And sometimes the person will say, well, if I can't have it, neither of us can have it, and we'll throw a grenade in. But yeah, you're right, if it's in the contracting out agreement. Good one. Do I need a formal agreement to divide up the house, which is more to settle RP?
If you can negotiate it and get agreement and transfer the house and money change hands and so forth, the theoretical answer to your question is yes. But the problem with that is that if you've got this was your point before, if you've got to go to the bank and the bank's going to be asked to lend money to one person, the bank's going to want to know that there's not going to be any relationship property arguments to come back and screw things up. And so the bank will say, yes, you've got to have that formal deed of agreement settling the division of property. And as a matter of practicality, the situation involves furniture, it probably involves vehicles, it involves KiwiSavers, it involves a whole lot of things, and there's danger in DIY in that you think you've sorted it all and you think you've done it according to the law. The point of the formal agreement is that each party has to go off and see a lawyer, and at that point, if actually someone's bullied the other one into a ridiculous situation, the lawyer's going to say, no, I'm not going to let you sign that. Although legally you have the right to, but it's not binding unless I've certified that I've advised you, so I'm not going to certify that because you're entering into such a stupid agreement, I don't think you understand it.
And that can happen even with the best will in the world, so you can have people who are cooperating, who are trying to do the right thing, but they don't realise what the law
I think KiwiSaver is such a huge one with that because there's so many people we meet and they go, oh,
There's
but
a
the
burning
KiwiSaver is mine.
Isn't it?
And
Yes.
someone might have 200,000 and someone might have nothing, and they don't realise that actually that's to be divided 50-50 in a division, that it's not, even though the KiwiSaver is in your name and you've earned it, it is actually relationship property.
In reality, you do need that formal agreement, and it does need to take into account legal elements. As a party trying to do it yourself and save legal costs, you may not know it all and therefore end up with an agreement that just becomes messy because a year or so down the track someone finds that it's not working for them, realises that it's not been formally signed off and says, I want to reopen it and get my full half.
Because that's the other side of a formal agreement, is it's binding.
And hopefully if you've got a creative lawyer, the other thing is that back to the KiwiSaver point, is you can actually access your KiwiSaver
through
if
an
you want
agreement.
to, and it may enable you to buy out the house. So
Yep.
you can actually withdraw KiwiSaver for an RP settlement. So
Yep.
I think that can be a really useful tool that your lawyer can help you with, right? You need the lawyer to withdraw the KiwiSaver for the first.
The lawyer's got to
show that there's an agreement.
the KiwiSaver people have got to be shown that it fits the rules of the KiwiSaver scheme. And the same applies with some superannuation schemes.
Yeah.
I had a situation recently with a police person, and a lot of money's locked up in the police superannuations.
Yeah.
But you can actually get that out too if you meet the terms of the deal.
Absolutely.
Cool. It's an odd number. That must be your question.
Is it always 50-50?
The law says equal sharing. 1976, they passed a law that started off the principle that dealt with centuries of unfairness and said the family home especially is to be divided 50-50. And there was, within about 3 years, there's one exception. So the answer is no, it doesn't have to be.
Yes.
The exception is enshrined in Section 13 of the Act. It is that
There are two exceptions.
two exceptions. Tina will tell us what the other one is. But if there are extraordinary circumstances which render equal sharing repugnant to justice, and those are the fancy words that Parliament came up with, then it can be unequal sharing of the family home. But within about 3 years of the law being passed, someone came along and said, I provided the house. We've lived for 5 years, I think it was, in this magnificent mansion. She put in nothing. I'm being gender appropriate to the case. And he said that's extraordinary, and there should not be equal sharing. And the Court of Appeal, realistically the highest court in the land at that stage, said no. It is not an extraordinary circumstance that one party comes to the marriage with all of the capital and the other party comes without, and it's not repugnant to justice because that's the way the law is saying it ought to be, and people still try to. Got a recent case where the client is outraged, exactly that situation, that he has the right to take half of her house. She paid for it all. And
what do you need to do if you don't want your partner to have half of the house?
Well, you're too late if you haven't done it at the start.
By the time you separate, you're too late. But contracting out agreement. Or a prenup. So the other exception to equal sharing, and there could well be others, the only one that sprang to mind then, so you've got Section 13, extraordinary circumstances, Section 15, economic disparity, which is the one that says you can have an unequal share of relationship property if one party has, if due to the roles and the division of function during the relationship, one party comes out of it with less earning capacity and living standards. And
so what that means in normal English is that someone has worked very, very hard full-time in their career and the other person has generally stayed home and looked after the kids and put their career on hold. That is the typical scenario, right, for Section 15.
For Section 15, yes. So the person who was the career person comes out with a greater personal capital, got an asset effectively that they can go on and earn money. Not always, and it means you've got to continue to work in whatever that job is, and the other person has got a lesser asset. So the law rebalances that by giving potentially, not always, an unequal share. So the person,
and that can be a very bitter pill to swallow in my personal situation. And I think this is like a common attitude. I've worked really hard in my career. And that is true. I have worked and I have made all this money and I have supported you during the relationship to live in my fancy house or whatever, and then they actually have to give the person that has stayed home and benefited from that more of the relationship property. And I think there's an element of thinking I've supported you for a long time, so why the heck do I have to give you more now?
But there's a lot of fairness and common sense in Section 15 because it doesn't work unless the person who stayed home has actually not got ahead in a career.
Exactly.
And the payment, the adjustment has to be targeted at what is necessary to right the balance of earning ability.
The economic disparity.
Yep, and and it's usually the mother, allow the mother to then restart her nursing training or whatever it is and get back to that law. I'm sorry. And so it's not just a big chunk of money, it's money that's calculated according to the difference between their two earning capacities or the economic disparity, and a payment to enable the other person to catch up.
Catch up.
And there's a lot of, like, it's not just like a check that gets written. There's a lot of, it's well argued, and you have to show why that is fair. It has to be just at the end of the day. And so, it might feel very unfair, but...
All of these things are endeavours to provide fair and just outcomes. And you said, does it always have to be equal? And you referred to property generally, not just the house, and I answered it unfairly by limiting it to the house. But it doesn't have to be equal. But the bottom line is that it should be equal, and that a court will interfere to make it equal.
Unless there's reasons.
And there's adjustments and oddities like Section 15 there, but it's being fair. Overseas people who I've known who have fought with the regimes overseas have said, in New Zealand you've got such a good set of rules. They are clear, they are 50-50. In other jurisdictions there's no certainty as to how it's to be divided. So when I say to you yes or no or whatever it was that I said, that's a social contract that's been set up since 1976.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Are we quite, we're pretty fair in New Zealand. We got the vote really early on. It's 1976 is probably quite early to come up with that principle of equal sharing.
How old were you then? Don't answer.
I'd been just born.
Well, I can tell you that before then, it was really, really hard to get a fair division of the property.
And it was only 2002 that it was extended to de facto relationships, wasn't it? So we're not quite that progressive.
It's a developing the things that need to be done so that more often than not there's fairness.
If I own a property now and my partner moves in, hypothetically, but definitely happened to me, how can I stop them from taking half of it if we were going to separate or one of us died?
So obviously the basics are, if the two of you are living in a home and your relationship qualifies, so if it's 3 years or it might be earlier, if there are children in a relationship, certain circumstances, then the family home becomes relationship property, which is divisible 50-50 on a separation.
If you've got the 3 years under your belt.
Once you've been together in a de facto relationship or a married or a civil union relationship.
So if you don't want it...
If you don't want that, then...
You sign a prenup or a contracting out agreement.
The first thing I would say in response to that is, what were you thinking of when you started a relationship with someone, but you thought, actually, I don't want you to have any of my stuff. We're going to have this relationship and we're going to share it and it's going to be happy and we're going to have kids and things are going to go really well and we can do lots of things. But hands off my stuff. That's not odd.
Well, that is a different scenario for most people because that is people getting together early, but the more common scenario... I can't tell you all the why, everything, because I'm still in a relationship. I want to stay in this relationship. But you've both got sets of children. That is honest, and that's the primary reason I think people keep it separate is because they've built up assets over their lifetime. You've built up assets over your lifetime, and you want it to go to your children. But I definitely take your point that there is a real push to say, this is mine, this is yours, and then if they die, you're destitute because they haven't provided for you in any way. You've got no income or whatever. They can't pay the mortgage.
There are also, people are moving in together, de facto relationship, marriage, civil union. Marriage and civil union, you know that that's something serious. You know it's going to have implications, legal implications. So you're taking on a different level of obligation to each other, I think, than some relationships which can develop from a flatmate relationship into a dating relationship, into a more committed. At what point, and the law will answer this one, we're not going to do it today, but at what point do you intend to create property relations, between each other? Because sometimes after 3 years, different relationships.
Well,
and there are
It's too
moves
soon.
afoot, right? They did an
Yep.
investigation into it where they've said actually what the public thinks and what we would recommend.
It's the Law Commission, right?
Law Commission, yeah, is that actually when you move into a house, you assess the value at the date of the beginning of your relationship, you get to keep it, and then you just share in the increase in value while you're together in a relationship. And I know that they said that like 80% of the public or something thought that was fair in these
you're
days.
bringing it,
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry about the passing of till death do us part. With all my worldly goods I thee endow. I mean, what are you going into these relationships for?
Well, I can't say that on a podcast.
And we don't want to know it anyway, what Shelley's going into a relationship.
I will say that when trusts can be problematic. They are not a good answer to a lot of the questions that people seem to think that they're going to achieve by forming a trust.
We were talking about Shelley's relationship and why she gets into them. She's got 4 lovely children, so I think it was a good decision by her. But I've got a question for Shelley.
Okay.
So you went through a separation yourself, and I was wondering if you could go back and tell yourself or talk to yourself back then, what advice would you give yourself about getting through
and obviously it was a very long relationship. It was like 25 years, so a pretty serious...
Obviously. You look really old.
Okay, and so what would I say? I love what Tony Lendrum said in that mediation, which is imagine that your teenage child, I have a 13-year-old daughter, imagine if your 13-year-old daughter is reading everything that you write or that you say, because I think that's a real thing to affect what you're going to say, because you say something. So basically, it's leave the petty behind. Don't point score. You're never going to win. Yeah. You obviously have problems with the communication or whatever, which is why I've separated in the first place. I'd say don't try and score points.
An affidavit is not therapy.
Yes, yeah.
And neither is a lawyer's letter.
And just little things like I would do I would do that parenting, what's it called, parenting through separation. I would do that really early in the relationship. I would set up a joint calendar that is really specific about times and days and where you're going to be, because a lot of the arguments that we had, and I assume this is the same for a lot of other people about the kids, what they're eating, what stuff they've got with them, what time you're dropping them off, and you said that you'd pick them up. So I think that's something that it can be really, really clear, and also minimise the number of drop-offs and pick-ups, because that is when the shit hits the fan, so to speak. That's always when you have the conflict, because someone
So how do you minimise them?
So I guess just setting up your custody. So a good way to do it is always, instead of dropping them off, one person drops them to school and one person picks them up, so then you're not getting an interaction that's going to create some conflict. So that is a real clever way, I think, of doing it. And then stuff is separate. And just, I think the other thing is that WhatsApp group. I would have rather set that up at the beginning that said this group is, or this chat, is just for the kids. It's just for the admin, and we can talk about all the other emotional stuff in emails. So it was like, I'm not going to respond to this unless this is about the kids. And then you can do all that kind of admin stuff all the time, and the other stuff gets...
So that kind of communication doesn't stop just because you fall out on another...
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing is maybe I just say, chill. It'll be okay, you'll get through it. Yeah. It's
a long game.
Yeah, exactly, but you'll be fine, and actually, you know, bad things happen and then you learn lots from them. It's not as bad as you think Shelley, it's going to be. Yeah, exactly.
I had an interesting situation with a mature couple. Both of them had other kids. Both of them had, I think most of the kids were pretty old, and they were developing they were entering into a relationship, and they wanted a contracting out agreement. Yeah. And one of the things I said to her, because everything was kept separate, she had a house, he had a property, they were going to live in his property, and I said everything was kept separate, which floored me a bit. And I said, what is there in it for you? Where is the us in you doing gardening on his property, but you don't have an interest in it, and so forth? Where's going to be your are you noble enough
Yeah.
pour your effort into the property you're living in with him,
Yeah.
and to know that it's being kept for his kids, who
Yeah.
you may decide you don't get on with well.
Yeah.
And it was that.
Yeah.
Where is the us in the relationship if
Yeah.
you split everything up? So the prenup, which these days often splits everything, to me, it just worries me as an old guy.
Yeah, and what is lost in your relationship when you're not building something together,
Yeah.
or what could your relationship gain if you have something to build together? More and more, those contracting out agreements are being future-proofed in
I
a way,
think
and
so,
it's clear
yeah.
from the law that if there is some relationship property to divide, your agreement is going to be more secure and stable at the end. So people are transferring a percentage of an asset out of a trust into joint names,
Yeah.
so that even if you've brought a house into the trust, you then own half of it as a couple and half of it stays in the trust. So there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, there is. And you can
Intelligent
provide for them in your will, right?
Yeah. And then change your will
And you can
afterwards.
lay it all out on the table and talk
Yeah.
about what you
Yes. Thoughtful
what
and
seems
considered
fair.
arrangements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes time to trust again. I don't think 3 years is enough in a relationship where you're prepared to share things, but setting up a contracting out agreement that has the ability to change over time.
Yeah, if your lawyer is suggesting that,
Yeah.
listen to it, I guess. I would say that. I would say that. But just think about how you might feel in 15 years if you are still in the relationship. Not to mention the legal implications of an agreement that that becomes seriously unjust over time.
Again, little old war story here, but what I like to say is, well, not a war story. What I like to say is, okay, you want to separate, but go to a counsellor, it's FDR these days, but go to a counsellor and talk it through before you actually separate. You do not, you don't want to do it, no, you hate the other person, it's an end, I'm not going to do that. And my suggestion is do it anyway. You'll either end up satisfied that separating's the right thing, and you will have considered, and there'll be a certain amount of respectfulness in how you've done it because it's being controlled by a good counsellor. But you will either decide that that's the right thing to do, or you will think, no, I'll give it another go. I didn't realise the other person felt that way, and we can cobble together a better relationship. What are you going to think like in a year?
Yeah.
Or 2 years, when the life that you planned when you wanted to split has turned out to be shit?
Yeah.
None of the things that you've hoped for have realised, and you look back and you think, should have stayed with her.
Yeah, I think there's something in that thing of I left
Them.
I left no stone unturned. Like I did everything I could at the time, and there was no resurrecting it. There was no moving forward. And then when it is hard on the kids, or when it's hard on you, you can think, well, I didn't make that decision lightly. I did everything.
I tried.
Awesome. I think we have used up our time from our burning issues session. So this has been Divorce Cafe. Thank you, Stuart, for coming down from Whangarei
Thank
to
you
talk
for
to
having
us
me
today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can check out our other episodes. There are also articles alongside each episode, which can be really useful content. If you have a burning issue, you can email us at divorcecafe@hendersonreeves.co.nz. So you can forget the at the start, just divorcecafe@hendersonreeves.co.nz. And we can see whether that could be a future episode.